Yo, what is up, guys? This is the first video of the fantasy schedule. I will be doing things differently, where I'm gonna have different sign-ons from different eras, and the bumpers are gonna alternate with Check It 1.0 and 3.0, which, as you will see later in the video. That's all I have to say. Join Discord and link in the bio, and let's get on with the video.
Coming up on Cartoon Network, next, The Looney Tunes Show. Coming up next, Regular Show on Cartoon Network. Coming up on Cartoon Network, next. Coming up on Cartoon Network, next, Generator Rex. Coming up on Cartoon Network, next. Coming up on Cartoon Network, next. Coming up on Cartoon Network, next, Ben 10. Coming up on Cartoon Network, next. Coming up next, The Amazing World of Gumball on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, more The Amazing World of Gumball on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, The Marvelous Misadventures of Flapjack on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, Teen Titans Go on Cartoon Network. Coming up on Cartoon Network, next, Tom and Jerry. Coming up next, What's New, Scooby-Doo on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, more What's New, Scooby-Doo on Cartoon Network. Coming up on Cartoon Network, next, Johnny Test. Coming up on Cartoon Network, next. Coming up next, Cartoon Planet on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, Courage the Cowardly Dog on Cartoon Network. Coming up on Cartoon Network, next, Camp Lazlo. Coming up on Cartoon Network, next, Regular Show. Coming up next, Teen Titans Go on Cartoon Network. Coming up on Cartoon Network, next. Coming up next, The Amazing World of Gumball on Cartoon Network. Check out what's coming up tonight on Cartoon Network. Next. Later. On Cartoon Network. Coming up on Cartoon Network, next, A New Adventure Time. Later, a new regular show. Next. Later. On Cartoon Network. Next. Later. On Cartoon Network. Next. Later. On Cartoon Network. Coming up next, Clarence on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, The Looney Tunes Show on Cartoon Network. Coming up on Cartoon Network, next. Coming up next, Meg on Cartoon Network. Coming up on Cartoon Network, next, The Amazing World of Gumball. Coming up next, Ed, Edd and Eddy on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, more Ed, Edd and Eddy on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, Adventure Time on Cartoon Network. Coming up on Cartoon Network, next, Batman, the Brave and the Bold. Coming up on Cartoon Network, next. Coming up on Cartoon Network, next, Thundercat. Coming up next, Clarence on Cartoon Network. Next. Coming up next, Total Drama Island on Cartoon Network. Coming up on Cartoon Network, next, Johnny Test.
Wow, you actually made it to the end. I appreciate you. Now, subscribe and like the video. And now listen to me sing this beautiful verse by Sir Drake talking to 21 Savage. And I'll see ya in the next video.